Well, hello and welcome to our webinar today, where we are going to be talking about CBD and menopause, a very hot topic these days. And I am Stacey Kazinchuk, Genev's Director of Health Coaching, and I am a registered dietitian and exercise physiologist. And here with me today is Aimee Shunney, and we are going to be talking to her again about CBD. And she is a naturopathic doctor in California. So welcome, Aimee, and thank you so much for joining us. Give our audience some information on your background and the work that you do with women in menopause.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I really love the opportunity to get to be here. We've been planning this for a while, so I guess it's finally upon us. So I'm a naturopathic doctor in Santa Cruz, California. I've been in practice for almost 20 years, and I work in an integrative medical clinic with a variety of different practitioners, chiropractor, acupuncturist, medical doctor, psychotherapist. So I feel really blessed that I get to have that kind of practice every day, which is a lot of fun. And my specialty is women's health and hormone balancing. I do see men, women, children for a variety of acute and chronic health issues, but women's health and hormone balancing, women gynecology, those are my mainstay. And the modalities that I use in practice range from lots of talk around dietary and lifestyle education, the use of therapeutic nutrition, also called dietary supplements, herbal medicine, and lots of hormones, also prescriptive medicines when necessary. So I do really consider myself an integrative practitioner, bringing the best of modern medical science together with evidence-based and time-tested traditional natural therapies as well.
I love that combination. And you make such a good point too on when we look at supporting women and women's health during menopause, it is this holistic approach. It's not this one-stop shopping. And so having that integrative collaboration is so powerful. So it sounds like you have an amazing work environment to be in to support women.
Well, I used to.
Oh. Fair enough.
Now you're looking at my amazing work.
Yeah, that's true.
But yes, I plan to get back there someday soon.
Yes, exactly. We're all working with new work environments these days for sure. Well, our topic today is CBD, and this is another area that you have been exploring and researching for several years now. And we bring this to the forefront. I get a lot of questions from women about CBD because it is more available on the market. And a lot of women specifically want support with sleep or anxiety and all these things that CBD is advertised for. So we'll get to those things down the line, but let's start with what is CBD. You can give a brief overview for our audience, especially those that might be new to the topic.
Sure. So the way that I got to CBD is kind of this convoluted path, as so many things in life can be sometimes, right? I in addition to being in private practice and being a mom, my third job is that I have been working with different companies in the natural products industry since 2011, doing education, which is a lot of fun. I love doing that as well. So back in 2014, I had some friends through a company that I had been working with who called me one day and said, you've got to check out CBD. And I said, what do I have to check out? I had never heard of it. It was 2014. So, I mean, my goodness, 20 years in practice, I've never seen any ingredient explode like we've seen CBD explode in the last 6 to 7 years, right? But it was not on my radar in 2014. It wasn't on the shelf at the health food store. And when it was explained to me that CBD was a cannabinoid, which is a type of compound found in the cannabis plant, THC being another cannabinoid. And of course, THC is the one most of us have heard of, right? Because that's the cannabinoid that gets you high. There's actually, interestingly, over 120 different cannabinoids that have been isolated in the cannabis plant. So THC and CBD being two of those 120. But when my friends and colleagues suggested that I look into CBD for myself, I said, why would I do that? I'm a women's health doc. I don't have a pain practice. I don't have a cancer practice, because at that point, that was how I thought about marijuana and cannabis and cannabinoids. And they said, no, doc, you got to look at this. You got to read about this. And I happen to love these particular people. So I started looking at it, researching it. I did what every good doctor does and tried it on my husband first.
Naturally.
Naturally.
Yeah.
And he actually began to sleep through the night. And when I married him, he had just kind of stopped sleeping. He would be up in the middle of the night, not stressed out, nothing wrong, just in his late 40s and up. And so that really changed it for him. And so I started to use it myself. I started to talk to my parents about, my kind of circle of guinea pigs, and then gradually started bringing it into my practice. And obviously the rest is history. That was 2015, and it's since become this huge thing. So CBD. So what is it? CBD, cannabidiol. As I mentioned, it's one of over 120 different cannabinoids that have been isolated in the cannabis plant. And the way in which it works is both directly and indirectly in how it affects our endocannabinoid system. I'm guessing that you have audience members who have never even heard of the endocannabinoid system, right?
Yeah, that's probably a good guess. Let's break it down for us.
Yeah. So we affectionately call it the ECS, by the way, which I would highly recommend, because endocannabinoid system is a mouthful.
Yeah.
So I didn't learn about the endocannabinoid system in medical school. And in fact, I would wager that 99% of doctors are still not learning about it. It wasn't even named until the 1990s. But the endocannabinoid system is made up of, get this, cannabis-like compounds that we actually make ourselves, which are called endocannabinoids. The enzymes that produce those and break them down, and then cannabinoid receptors, which we have spread out all over and throughout our body in all organ systems of our bodies. And we have two major types of cannabinoid receptors, thankfully called CB1 and CB2. That one's not too hard to remember. CB1 receptors are predominantly distributed in the brain, and in particular in a part of our brains called the limbic system. The limbic system, some of you may have heard of. It includes structures in the brain like the amygdala, the hypothalamus, the prefrontal cortex. The limbic system is the part of our brains that manage our emotional lives. All of the emotions that we feel and fear. That was a fun pun, but yes, or a fun slip of the tongue. But yes, fear, memory, motivation, mood. The limbic system is the queen of all of those things. And so obviously how we handle and manage our stress is huge. CB2 receptors also in the brain, but more predominantly distributed in the periphery, in the immune tissue, where it plays a really important part in our inflammatory response, and the modulation of our immune system. So this is where, when we think about things like pain and inflammation, why you hear about CBD and other cannabinoids as being so important also. So that's our endocannabinoid system. I almost picture it like a net that goes over the whole rest of the body, because the endocannabinoid system touches and impacts our endocrine system, our hormones, our neurotransmitters, our cardiovascular system, our pulmonary system. Every system of the body is impacted by the health and the balance of our endocannabinoid system. Now, there's lots of things that we recommend doing all the time to support our endocannabinoid system. We just didn't have the language for it before, right? So eating a healthy whole foods diet that is high in anti-inflammatory compounds like antioxidants and long chain omega-3 fats and fiber and things like that. Physical activity, not being sedentary, maintaining a healthy weight, managing your stress response, meditation, mindfulness, getting outside, all this stuff we've been telling people forever to do for a variety of reasons. Well, one of those reasons is because it helps to balance the endocannabinoid system. Fast forward to now, and we have CBD and other cannabinoids. Now, these are phytocannabinoids, right? They come from a plant. instead of being an endocannabinoid that comes from inside me that I make.
Mhm.
These phytocannabinoids like CBD, they can come in and be a direct conduit to also help create more balance in that endocannabinoid system. And as I described, any imbalance that's taking place with that limbic system response to, for example, stress, will be better if you help balance the endocannabinoid system. You'll have more resilience, adaptive.
Wow.
My microphone just changed again.
That's okay. Yeah, I did. I noticed that. We got most of it though.
Do you want me to go back?
I think.
Yeah, why, if you don't mind.
I think it should be okay now. Am I back?
You're
you're back.
fine now, yeah.
Do you want me to back up on anything I was just saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember where it got cut off.
Yeah.
I'm going to take these AirPods and actually move them out of the room so they
Okay.
stop
That's a good
talking to my computer. Okay, hopefully they can't control me from the kitchen.
Okay. All right.
Do you want me to back up or?
Yeah, I would say maybe just a little bit. If you remember where you had got, where you were coming from and going to in terms of.
I mean, I can just kind of go back to.
You talked about the endo versus phytocannabinoids.
Do that.
Okay.
We can do that. Let's focus on. So when it comes to balancing the endocannabinoid system, we can use all of those dietary and lifestyle things to help us. But what we're learning now is that we can also use phytocannabinoids, right? So not an endocannabinoid, which is something I make myself. Endo stands for endogenous, which means I produce it. So unlike the endocannabinoids I already make, using a phytocannabinoid like CBD can come in and help to create more balance in my endocannabinoid system. If you remember that the ECS is really important in that limbic system, in that part of your brain that manages your emotional life, we can understand why when there's imbalances there, we're going to have mood instability and anxiety, and we're not going to handle our stress as well as we used to. Our sleep will be impacted, our energy will be impacted, then our mood gets worse, and it's a vicious cycle. If we can come in and help support that endocannabinoid system, we can nip some of that in the bud by creating a healthier, more resilient stress response, keep us stable mood-wise, keep us sleeping, and all good things will come from that. That's a victorious cycle, right?
Excellent. Wow, that's a lot of fascinating information, Aimee. Thank you so much. And I'm visualizing the CBD products actually coming in and almost like repairing holes or something in our system to help keeping things flowing normally, or really provides that patchwork almost for a quilt to keep the integrity.
I like that. I think that's a really great way to think about it. And I also think of it not only as patch repair, but I also think about it as almost like coming in and creating a fortified lining in the quilt that makes it harder to pull apart in the first place.
Yeah.
Right? Because studies actually show when we look at circulating levels of endocannabinoids, so when we measure them, what we see is that people who have higher circulating levels of endocannabinoids, well, a few things. First of all, they're less likely to report themselves as anxious, right? Wow. So because it's almost protective, those endocannabinoids being at a higher level. The other thing that we see is that people who have higher baseline levels of endocannabinoids, when presented with a stressor, they do not have as big of a stress response. They don't make as much cortisol in response, and they come back to baseline faster. So they recover. They don't kind of overdo it, and then they recover, right? Which is what we want. And my perimenopausal patients, I mean, almost to a T, they come in and one of the first things they say is, I just can't handle what I used to be able to handle. I mean, I'm just 0 to 60 in a second, and I'm mad, I'm yelling at my kids, and I'm impatient. And part of that is that stress response that's gone awry. And I would relate that back to endocannabinoid levels not being optimal. CBD comes in, helps keep our endocannabinoids around longer. And also, of course, hits into some of the same receptor sites that our endocannabinoids would too. So it, again, creates that stronger, more resilient baseline that kind of gives us some buffer and a leg up.
Oh, wow. Yeah, lots of benefits here.
Yes.
You mentioned, I want to come back to the stress response. I think most people are familiar with stress, but let's, if you don't mind giving a little bit more background of what happens when the body's under stress. And then where does menopause play a role in that? How does menopause connect to stress in the body?
Sure. Well, I often refer to menopause as a big doozy.
I think a lot of women would agree.
Yeah, because you know, here you are, you're in your 40s, or maybe if you made it to your early 50s without having symptoms, you're lucky. But these are some of the most stressful, you know, and that doesn't have to mean bad, right? But these are some of the most intensely demanding times of our lives as women, in our careers, with our families, with our children, with our elders, you know, with our partnerships, you know, all of these things. So here we are at a time where we're juggling a lot more, and the stakes are quite high as we age and move towards middle age. And just at that time when we need our stress response, you know, functioning the most, it starts to take more of a toll on how well that's working. Our hormones start to decline, and, you know, boom, boom, it's a 1-2 punch. So I feel like there's a lot of practitioners, menopause practitioners out there, who just focus on the sex hormone changes. But I feel like if you don't also pivot to also be looking at what the adrenals are doing, you're not going to have your benefits are not going to be as good, because it's such an underlying important thing. The other thing I'll mention is that, you know, your brain gets different messages about which hormones it's supposed to be producing. And when you're in fight or flight, which is part of that healthy stress response, but when you're in that fight or flight a lot, your body is prioritizing surviving. It's prioritizing escaping the saber-toothed tiger and getting up in the tree so that it gets tired and runs away and leaves you alone and you don't die, right? So when your body is busy making the hormones that allow you to escape that saber-toothed tiger, the messages aren't there to make sex hormones in the same way, because making babies isn't what's supposed to be happening when you've got a saber-toothed tiger hot on your tail, right? So the stress in and of itself will also start to diminish and change the way we make sex hormones. So it's so very interrelated. You know, when your body's under stress, when your limbic system perceives from your environment that we're in danger, it starts to send messages through the sympathetic nervous system and through the endocrine system. Something your viewers might have heard of is called the Hpa Axis. We'll just throw some more alphabet soup into this situation. But the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. And the H, the hypothalamus, that's a structure of the brain that's part of that limbic system that I mentioned. And when stress is perceived, the hypothalamus, in the case of the HPA axis, makes something called CRH, which is a cortisol releasing hormone. It triggers the pituitary gland, which is in another part of the brain, to make something called ACTH, which then stimulates the adrenal gland, right, to make cortisol and other things too. But in this case, cortisol. Cortisol comes up so that we can manage the stress. We can run further, faster if we need to get away from the saber-toothed tiger. We're not resting. We're not digesting. We're not making babies, right? We've got blood flow to the lungs and the heart so that we can go fast. We got our pupils dilated so we can see, right? We're in fight or flight. Then when that cortisol level comes up, it tells the brain, hey, I got this. Right? And then the CRH decreases, the ACH decreases, the cortisol decreases. That's a healthy stress response loop. As you can imagine, when it's like stress, saber-toothed tiger all day long, 24/7, that whole pathway and that negative feedback mechanism can just get busted and go awry. And in that situation, you're running around in fight or flight. You add that to a perimenopausal woman whose progesterone is declining, whose estrogen levels are starting to fluctuate, and you're getting yourself into a situation where you have a lot of sleepless, moody women who are gaining weight and are not happy about it. And that's the bulk of my practice.
Yeah. And you bring up such a good point. Again, it comes back to everything's so integrated. I
Yes.
will say with the majority of the clients that I work with, they notice that connection between stress and their symptoms.
Yes.
And so we're able to take a step back and get them to realize when they're having their symptoms. I would say 8 out of 10 times they come back and they say, when I was stressed, I had more hot flashes.
Yep.
When I was stressed, all of a sudden, I wasn't able to think as clear, like all these things that they may not have recognized before, but that stress is powerful.
Well, and what does stress do? I mean, if your cortisol levels are high, that spikes up your insulin, which makes it really hard to lose weight. I mean, it's a tough confluence of events. So sometimes one of the simplest, notice I didn't say easiest, but simplest places to start is looking at that stress, because it is such a trigger. And even when we feel helpless, we do have the power to implement stress management measures, right? You may not be able to get the stress out of your life, but you can change how you perceive and react to it. CBD, if there's one thing that I hear over and over again, and what's so interesting to me is it was my own experience personally, which then I've gotten to see mirrored in hundreds of women, is when I take my CBD, the stuff just doesn't get to me as much. Like I just don't react as much. For me, I remember being in a parking lot, having somebody cut me off, honk at me. Now I may be in California, but I'm a New York girl, and I don't take to that lightly.
Yeah.
And I'm not afraid to wag a finger at somebody. But there I was, this person so angry with me, cutting me off. I was late for work, and I just kind of went and let him go, and actually stopped myself and went, wait a minute, what just happened? Because that kind of response from a supplement or an herb, or in this case CBD, it sneaks up on you, right? It's not that obvious until you suddenly notice that your pattern isn't there much. And I hear this from patients over and over again. No, nothing's really changed. My boss is still a jerk, or whatever it is. But I can handle it better. And that's what we were talking about. It's helping with that baseline endocannabinoid tone, which puts us in a better place to be able to manage what comes at us on a daily basis. And maybe this is never more important than it is in perimenopause or menopause, because the other thing about healthy adrenals is that we need them to make hormone precursors to help us out as ovarian hormone production declines. Right? So when our adrenals are struggling, we don't get those precursors either. And that makes everything worse also. And then of course the sleep factor is just crucial, and so important in menopause.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we know that sleep is just so critical really for that day-to-day functioning.
All bets are off. If you're not sleeping, I don't care what your chief complaint is that you listed on your intake form, sleep goes to the top if you're not sleeping. Because what can I possibly accomplish with your health goals if you're not sleeping well? Very little.
Yeah, so important.
And CBD has really, really been a game changer in increasing my ability to help people with chronic, difficult sleep issues. Not everybody, but way more than any other natural ingredient I've ever worked with.
Aimee, can you talk about that? Because I do get that question a lot. And we have, Genève has CBD products, and we use them, or we market them specifically for sleep support.
Yeah.
But can you talk a little bit about how CBD can be used in different ways, and how some people may benefit for sleep? Some people may benefit it for mood or anxiety instead.
Sure, absolutely. So first of all, I've been using the Genève CBD with the melatonin, and I love that product.
Oh, awesome. That's
Yeah.
so great to hear. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, you sent me some over when I agreed to have this chat with you.
Yeah.
And so of course I was going to try it, and I really like it. And I like that it's a small amount of melatonin,
Mhm.
1 milligram. I think that people often don't need 5. Now there's other reasons why you might want higher melatonin, but
Mhm.
that's another webinar.
Okay.
In this case, to kind of help you kind of, you know, make sure that your circadian rhythm is right on track. I think the melatonin is great. Plus, it's a lovely anti-inflammatory.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, people often will say to me, "Well, which CBD is for sleep? Which CBD
Mhm.
is for anxiety?" And they're all for all of them,
Mhm.
because they're all for your endocannabinoid system. So when you start to get confused and bogged down with which does what, remember that they're all impacting your endocannabinoid system. So they could all be used for pain and inflammation, for sleep, for anxiety. Now, obviously, if you've got a product like the Genève product with the melatonin in it,
Mhm.
that's going to be a better nighttime product, right?
Okay.
But the other sleep product you have, the drops,
Mhm.
could absolutely be used during the day,
Okay.
and even throughout the day for pain and inflammation.
Mhm.
Um, Here's the deal: what it takes to balance your endocannabinoid system may be totally different than what it takes to balance mine,
Yep.
right? And what it takes to balance mine might be very different. 2 weeks ago versus what it is now while I'm waiting for these election results to roll in, right? So,
Right.
it's such a dynamic thing.
Mhm. Yeah.
So what that means is that this is the ingredient that makes those of us who are integrative and functional practitioners have to walk the walk in regards to we are biochemically different, each of
Mhm.
us. And so I can't give you a one size fits all description for how to use CBD. Nobody likes that.
No, it's uncomfortable.
Nobody likes
Just
that.
tell me what to do.
But it is what it is.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
is what it is. So I feel like the best bet across the board is to start low.
Mhm.
So always start with a small dose. Worst case scenario, you're gonna go, this isn't doing anything for me.
Mhm.
I find that when we're dealing with anxiety, or we're and by the way, kind of garden variety worrying anxiety is a huge part of why women in perimenopause aren't sleeping,
Right.
right? It's not some other medical cause of insomnia. I mean, obviously hot flashes can keep you up, and you may need something to balance your estrogen and progesterone for that part, but for a lot of women it's anxiety, and it's can't get off that wheel.
Mhm.
CBD is great for that, and I find that you often need so much less than you think. So
Mm.
small doses. As you go up higher in your dosing, you're going to get into a more therapeutic dose when it comes to things like pain,
Mm.
which could be severe menstrual cramps or pelvic pain. I use it a lot for that. I use it for vulvodynia. I use it for all manner of women's pain, not to mention headaches and migraines and pain of any kind.
Mhm.
Um, as you get into a higher dosage, you're going to start to get some sedating effect,
Okay.
which, for some people, they need to be sedated a little bit to sleep properly. Anybody out there who takes oral progesterone, part of the reason that that is so helpful for sleep is because there's a very sedating metabolite that's created as you digest it, which is
Mm.
different than a progesterone cream, which doesn't make that metabolite. So sometimes you need a little sedating help, but the lower doses of CBD don't help you sleep because they're sedating. They help you because they quiet the stress response and they reduce anxiety,
Wow.
right?
So fascinating. Everything's just, again, like you said, all connected and so many different components here. And thank
Yeah,
you so much for pointing out the individuality, because we do see that a lot, with women in menopause. They want to know, just tell me what to do so this goes away.
of course.
And so often it really is, how can we work best with your body and your body's response?
Right. Absolutely. And isn't it as good a time as any to learn that lesson?
Yes,
Right?
absolutely.
Right?
For
Yeah,
sure.
to do that. Um, there was one other thing that I was going to say, and it zipped out of my head. It'll come back in a second, I'm sure.
Okay. Well,
Perimenopause brain. What can I say?
yeah, it's on brand right now. Totally appropriate on these webinars to have brain fog. It happens all the time. Uh,
Totally.
well, one other thing I'd like, if you wouldn't mind going into, is production of CBD and supplements. With so many options out there on the market, what should women be looking for if they are looking for a CBD supplement?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because all CBD is not created equal. I mean, all supplements are not created equal,
Mhm.
right? I mean, as a naturopathic doctor, I've been talking to people for 20 years about how important it is to understand where your supplements come from, where the raw materials have come from, what the third-party testing has been to ensure heavy metal, toxin levels, freshness, all those kinds of things. And even though there is a 6-month supply at Costco, that's a really good deal, not of CBD yet, but, fish oil for that, whatever. That doesn't mean that that's what you should be buying, right? You really do get what you pay for. And I think that CBD is potentially even more important, to be careful in that regard, because there's so much on the market that is just not high quality,
Mhm.
where we see CBD and THC quantities, not what they say on the label. Hemp is a bioaccumulator, so it will suck up any heavy metals and toxins in the soil that it's grown in. So it's really important to know sourcing. So I would say know where it comes from, know where it's grown. It's great if it says organic, but actually there's not a very standardized organic program for hemp that's up and running in this country yet. It's coming. And if you see organic, that's great, but keep in mind that there's not really a big governing body to ensure that and what that means. So if
Okay.
you understand where it's grown and how it's grown, you can get an understanding if pesticides were used. So that can be very helpful. You want to make sure it's non-GMO.
Mhm.
For sure. And then maybe even more important, certainly as important as were pesticides used when it was grown, which obviously is great to know if you can find the answer, is has the company used an independent lab to do third-party testing? Because then you can check for pesticide residue, right?
Mm.
I mean, so it's good to know, was this sprayed with pesticides, but there could still be pesticides in the soil. So
Mm.
what you really want to do is look at pesticide residue, heavy metal residue. Anyway, any good supplement, including CBD supplement, worth its weight, is going to have certificates of analyses available for the consumer to look at that list all of these important things. And I believe Genève does the scannable QR code on all their
Yep.
products, right?
On our CBD, we do.
On the CBD.
Yep, and all of our supplements are third party verified, and then the CBD specifically has a QR code you can scan.
And I love that trend that's happening in the CBD industry. I think
Yeah.
all the better companies are just like, you know what, we're not going to make anybody fish for this information, call anyone. Who wants to call the company? All you have to do is take your phone, hover it over the QR code, and boom, you're going to get to see CBD content. You're going to get to of that lot, THC content of that lot, and then you're going to get to see things like pesticides, heavy metals. I'm not sure if you guys do. Some companies do, mold and other things like that. But those things are all available to be seen, which I think is extremely important. And then one other thing that I would mention is dosing, and how it's displayed on the bottles. I think that there's a lot of companies out there that make it very confusing to actually figure out how much CBD you're getting in a serving. They might list the amount of hemp oil, and not list the CBD. Some companies do that because they want to avoid any gray legal areas. And so they don't want to actually put how much CBD is there. Again, I think the better companies are like, you know what, this is legal under current law. So until we hear differently, we're going to label this in the way that best practices dictates, which is to put the dose, right?
Right.
So you want to look for a CBD dose, and then not just CBD in the bottle, right? So if you see a CBD product that says 1,500 milligrams of CBD, I'll have patients come in and I'll say, how much are you taking? And they'll say, I'm taking 1,500 milligrams. And I'll say, no, you're not. Let's get the bottle and let's figure out what you're taking, right? The dose is going to be somewhere between 1 and probably 25 milligrams max over the counter in a store like that. And usually probably in the 10 to 15 milligram or so range. So anything that makes you think you're taking 1,500, 2,000, 3,000 milligrams, that's probably the amount that's in the whole bottle. So do make sure you're clear. Make sure that if you're using something in a dropper, you can actually measure what you're taking. So these things are important too. And to me, they are the hallmark of a good quality company, right? It's like a little tell that lets you know that these are people that are crossing all their T's and dotting all their I's to make sure that you're taken care of and you know what you're taking.
Yeah, that transparency. I appreciate you giving that consumer savvy tips, because it's so easy for women, especially when they're in this state of not feeling great and just want whatever's going to make them feel better. And marketers and supplement companies know that, and they are out to take advantage of women, and that's not fair.
Yeah.
And so the companies that really are looking to support them
Yes.
and to support you are the ones that you want to be investing in.
And I would add that I think the dispensaries can be not always the most helpful.
Mhm.
And, so I have a lot of patients, I'm in California, I have a lot of patients who go to the dispensaries. Keep in mind that the folks working at the dispensaries, while very well intentioned, have very variable education. I've gone into many myself, and mostly because in the beginning of all of this, I knew a lot of my patients were going to dispensaries, and I wanted to create relationships with some of the bud tenders and the managers so that I could have patients talk to somebody who would go, oh yeah, this Dr. Shunney likes this product, or whatever. And honestly, I was terribly disappointed with my experiences. And if I would go in and kind of do like a secret shopper kind of thing, and be like, I want a CBD product that's this much, and I want the THC to be less than this much. And they'd say, well, what are you looking for? I said, I want it for sleep. And I said, that's not what you want this, right? And I would say, no, I want this. Sorry, we're having outdoor sweeping happening. That was very disappointing to me. And particularly because whereas I might be like, no, I know what I want, my patients might go, oh, okay. And then they come back with something that makes them feel high or makes, it's just, so I would just say, if you're using a dispensary as your source, be careful and do insist, if you don't want to feel the THC, do insist that it is going to, that there's as low THC as possible. Certainly less than 0.3% THC would be legally hemp and not marijuana. That's the somewhat arbitrary but legal definition. And that will help ensure that you're not going to feel anything from the THC. So just be careful in the dispensary. That's all. There's a lot of people with big opinions.
Yeah, good recommendations there. And how about when it comes to THC? I've had clients ask as well, they get drug tested for their job. So if they're taking our products, what's the likelihood, if I'm taking CBD, am I going to test positive for THC, or am I going to have a positive drug screen?
Well, you guys pull your THC out, don't you?
Yes. Yeah. From ours, it's completely out.
Yeah. So for Genev's products, you're in luck.
Okay.
There's you're not going to test positive. But I would say if you're using any other kind of CBD product that's derived from hemp, there are small amounts of THC that could, depends how much you take and how frequently, and your detox system and your genetic SNPs and variants and things like that, but you could test positive. So unfortunately, if you need to pass a drug test for parole, custody, work, whatever it is, you need to seek out a product that's had the THC removed. Thankfully, that is becoming more and more possible in the industry. It wasn't a few years ago, and which was such a bummer to me, that for that teeny tiny amount of THC, all of these people were missing out on some really important, stress, mood, sleep support, pain support. I'm like, how is an opiate legal here? But
right.
Unfortunately, that's not an issue, but certainly make sure you're getting a product where the THC has been removed if you want to not have to worry about a drug test.
Good reminder. And then you had mentioned dosing and starting low. What would be in a range if someone was just looking to get into starting CBD for some of their menopause symptoms? Would you have a starting range that you use with your patients?
Yeah, so when I think of using it with my menopause symptoms, I'm thinking that we're probably dealing with more increased anxiety, more variable mood, poor stress response, and maybe also not sleeping also. And a lot of times, if I can't differentiate between if the sleep is being caused by anxiety or the sleep is being caused by hot flashes, depending on where we're at in the treatment arc, I might start with CBD and see how far I get before, for example, we do herbs or hormones specific for heat. It depends. But as far as dosing goes, what I'll usually recommend is if you're dealing with anxiety that you kind of wake up with and is a problem throughout the day, I would look to take somewhere between 5 and 25. I know that's a large range, but 5 and 25 milligrams in the morning. And I would do that prophylactically. If it's something that you are regularly dealing with, I would start doing it on a daily basis. Again, creating that healthy baseline endocannabinoid tone. And I'd start with 5 milligrams, which could do the trick. There was a great study with a hemp-derived CBD extract where the average dose was 25 milligrams. And there was 80% of the people in the study had a significant decrease in anxiety in the first month of the study. So I feel like in my own clinical practice that milligram dosage is a little high for anxiety. So that's why I tend to start lower and work my way up there. And then if bedtime is an issue, I would do a similar dose at bedtime, 5 to 25, and work my way up. So, the nice thing about the liquid, can you confirm for me? I believe the capsules have the melatonin in it and it's the liquid that's the CBD alone, right?
Correct. Yep. So
the great thing about the liquid is that you're going to get some sublingual absorption. So you're actually going to feel it within about 15, 20 minutes when you hit the right dose.
Okay. That's
which is great for anxiety, right? Because you can kind of have this morning baseline dose that you use. But then you can have it in your bag, or these days we're home more, so you have it at home, so that you can do a smaller dose, so, maybe if 10 or 15 milligrams is your morning dose, if you're starting to feel overwhelmed and like everything's really coming up for you, you're having more mood swings, the hot flashes are coming up, you can do 5 or 10 milligrams during the day, just as needed. And again, within 15 to 20 minutes, when the dose is right, you should feel something. If you start to feel really tired and groggy, you probably took too much. And the next time you do it, you should take a little less.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to that self-experimentation, learn how your body responds, and everyone's going to be a little bit different.
Yeah, my goal with CBD is always to give people enough information to help them get started and then get them to a place where they feel comfortable enough with the ingredient that they can play with it based on their own needs. And then, what happens over time, maybe you need it every night to sleep for a month, and then you magically and interestingly forget to take it and you're fine, so, but that's good, right? Because that means you brought the endocannabinoid system and the way it's communicating with your hormones and your neurotransmitters into a better balance. Will it go out of balance again? Probably. Right? But now you've got more tools to help you. And that's what it's all about, is getting us to a place where we can use those tools.
Awesome. One other question I have for you, Aimee, is on CBD food products. So we see out there's beer with CBD, there's kombucha with CBD, there's sparkling water with CBD, there's brownies with CBD, like all sorts of things. Are we getting the same thing if we're buying a fizzy water with CBD?
It's a great question. I don't totally know the answer. I would think, knowing what I know about, pharmacokinetics and biochemistry, that in a fizzy water, for example, that wouldn't be all that different, because there's not a lot that needs to be digested and broken down. But as you start to get into food, I can't help but wonder, what we know, right, is if you take a capsule of CBD product by itself, it's going to take longer for you to feel it. We know that it can take anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour and a half versus, 15 to 30 minutes with a sublingual. Then if you throw a lot of other stuff into that food you're digesting, it's like, how much at the end of the day is really getting to the receptor sites where it needs to be. And I absolutely don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I also feel like, it's like having fish oil in your Fruity Pebbles, or, like be careful what you're doing. I mean, if you stick the CBD into something that's unhealthy or is exacerbating your inflammation or your anxiety or your, caffeine, right? It could be exacerbating anxiety, that, we start to temper the health benefits of the CBD if there's other things in there too that could be kind of counteracting the benefits. So it's interesting, it's fun, but I don't, at the end of the day, I'm not sure what the data will end up telling us. I'm guessing that they're not going to be the most effective way to get it therapeutically.
Yeah.
Listen, we do have this idea that if we have lots of antioxidants and, lots of good stuff, and we just have little bits all the time, it kind of helps our system. And so maybe little bits of CBD all the time helps the endocannabinoid system, but I don't know. I don't have nearly as much experience with that as with using it in a more therapeutic way.
I appreciate your insight. So jury's still out, but right now going for supplements that are verified, that can tell you where it's from.
Yes.
And that have, and the amount and everything.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. One more thing that I would say, which you're making me think of with the food, is how did the CBD get out of the plant? Right? Because there's an extraction process involved, right? You have to, you can't just pluck the hemp and then get the oil out, right? You have to extract it and pull it out. And so, CO2 extraction, which is what Genevieve uses, this is kind of the gold standard of a gentle extraction process that doesn't leave chemicals or any harmful substances behind. And we can find out from a supplement company what their extraction process is. I think that's probably a bit harder to do in the food and beverage industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a good point. Well, thank you so much for all of your insight. This was a fabulous conversation. I learned a ton, and I know it's going to be a great resource for our listeners. Any other closing remarks or information that you want to share with our listeners today?
About CBD specifically?
CBD specifically, and then also if they're interested in reaching out to you or working with you, is there ways to do that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. In regards to CBD, I would just say that if working with CBD has driven anything home for me over the years, it's the importance of how to manage stress. The importance of making sure that that's being looked at in any kind of treatment protocol. And I think as women, one of the things that that helps us maintain a healthy stress response is connecting with other people, is relationship. And, we know how to give in those kinds of relationships pretty well often, but we don't always set ourselves up for a lot of receiving of that kind of, gentle, human, kind connection. And so one of the things I always tell my patients is to make a list of activities that really make their hearts sing and relationships that really leave them feeling nourished and just satisfied in having been able to really be yourself for that time that you're with that person. We all have relationships where that's really not what's on the ticket, but taking those relationships where it is and those activities that make our hearts sing and really prioritizing them, just like we prioritize getting healthy food at the store, getting to the gym, whatever it is, because that kind of connection feeds us as women. So, I would leave you with that, that and some CBD, and you're in good shape.
There you go.
Yeah. If anybody wants to get a hold of me, I do telehealth consultations, especially these days. And my website is drshunney.com, DRSHUNNEY.com. There's also a ton of free info there, including a lot of stuff on CBD. So there's podcasts, and there's videos, and there's blogs and webinars and all kinds of free learning material. I'm also on Instagram at Dr. Amazing, DoctorAmezing.
All right. Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything. And if any of our listeners are interested in working with any of our dietitian health coaches, you can go to Genève and look at the plans and pricing page, and that gives you more information on how to sign up. And we can help with a lot of these things too, in terms of lifestyle strategies for anxiety and sleep, hot flashes, things that really can be supportive for that. And then our telemedicine team, and we do have naturopathic doctors and OBGYNs trained specifically in menopause, can also offer telemedicine support for you, whether it be any type of hormone support, medications, or even just learning more about the process. A lot of women really don't know what's happening right now, and that's not uncommon, but having that knowledge of how your body is changing and what to expect can really be empowering. So more resources for you at geneve.com as well.